The awakening Daniel woke to the sound of soft breathing. It was not his own. For a moment, his mind was slow, still lost in the haze of sleep. The air in the room was warm, carrying a faint sweet scent he didn't remember from the night before. His eyelids felt heavy, but as they opened, he noticed something strange. There was a weight on his chest. His vision cleared, and he froze. Lying across him was an alien woman. Her skin had a faint silver-blue tone that shimmered softly in the dim morning light. Her hair, long and pale as moonlight, spilled over his arm. She was wearing a simple maid's dress. Well, it had been neat last night, but now it was wrinkled from sleep. Her head rested against his chest, her hands lightly gripping his shirt, as if afraid he might disappear. Daniel's first thought was, what in the stars is going on? He tried to move, but her grip tightened. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises like molten gold. They met his gaze without fear, without embarrassment, and with a strange calm. Then she spoke in a soft, even voice. "It's a custom," she said. Daniel blinked. "Ah, custom?" "Yes," she nodded slightly, still resting on him, "among my people. Sleeping like this means you are now under my protection, and I am under yours." Daniel stared at her, trying to decide if she was joking, but her face was serious, almost solemn. He felt his pulse quicken, not because of the closeness, but because of the weight of her words. "Why would I need protection?" T asked. His voice low, she looked away for a moment, her eyes scanning the shadows in the corners of the room. Then she whispered, "Because someone is coming for me. And now they must face you first." That did not make him feel any better. Daniel glanced toward the door. It was closed, but in the silence, he thought he heard faint footsteps in the distance. He swallowed. "All right," he said slowly. "Let's start from the beginning. Who are you?" "My name is Lyra," she replied. "I work here as a maid. Or I used to." Daniel frowned. "Used to?" "They will fire me today," she said quietly. Or worse, something in her tone made him uneasy. She wasn't just worried about losing her job, she was afraid for her life, and this. "Custom," Daniel said carefully. "Why me?" She looked back at him, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of desperation in her eyes. "Because you are human," she said. "Because they fear humans in ways they do not fear others." Daniel almost laughed. "Fear me? I'm just a cargo runner." But Lyra shook her head. "You are unpredictable, and in this city, unpredictability is dangerous enough to make them hesitate." A faint metallic click echoed from somewhere outside the room. It was the sound of a weapon being readied. Daniel's breath caught. He whispered, "Who's out there?" Lyra hesitated. "Men from the noble house. They want something I found, and you think sleeping on me will stop them?" He asked. "Yes," she said firmly. "Our law is old, but it is still a bad if. I mark you as my protector. They must challenge you before they can touch me." Daniel stared at her. His life had been quiet these last months. No trouble, no danger, just work, meals, and sleep. And now, in the space of a few minutes, an alien maid had turned his morning into the start of a fight he didn't ask for. A sudden knock came at the door, 3 sharp raps. "Lyra," a deep voice called from outside. "Open the door." Her grip on Daniel's shirt tightened. Her eyes were wide now. The calm replaced by fear, Daniel whispered, "What do we do?" "Stay still," she murmured. "They will not break the door if they believe you are here. They don't want a scene." "Not yet," the voice outside called again, more impatient this time. The sound of boots shifted on the wooden floor. Then silence. Minutes passed. Daniel's heartbeat slowed, but the tension in the air didn't fade. Lyra finally sat up, moving off his chest. She kept close. Sitting on the edge of the bed, her voice was low but urgent. "They will try again, maybe today, maybe tonight, but if you accept the custom, I will not run, and you will not be alone in this." Daniel looked at her. Her golden eyes held a strange mix of courage and sadness. He didn't know why. But something in him told him she was telling the truth. Outside, the footsteps returned, softer this time, and Daniel realized whoever was out there wasn't leaving. They were waiting. The room stayed quiet for several long minutes. Daniel kept his eyes on the door. Wondering if the footsteps would come back, Lyra sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her breathing was steady, but her shoulders were tense. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "All right. I think you should tell me everything." Lyra looked at him, then nodded slowly. She shifted on the bed so she could face him directly. "In my culture," she began, "sharing sleep is not something done lightly. It is a sign, a declaration that the two are bound together. You are my protector now, and I am your shield." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Shield? You don't exactly look ready for a fight." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "A shield does not have to be made of metal. It can be law, it can be tradition. And our law is very old." She took a deep breath before continuing. "If someone harms me, they must first defeat the one I have chosen as protector. If they harm you, they risk angering me and my entire family line." Daniel frowned. "So, your people still follow this old custom?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Even the nobles respect it, at least in public. It keeps them from acting openly. They cannot just take me while I am under your protection." Not without losing face, Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "And if they decide they don't care about losing face?" Her voice dropped lower. "Then they will come in the dark, without witnesses." The thought made Daniel uneasy. He glanced again at the door, half expecting it to burst open. "Why are they after you?" he asked. Lyra hesitated. Her golden eyes flickered toward the floor. "Because I saw something I was not supposed to see." Daniel leaned forward. "What?" Her fingers tightened on her skirt. "The noble family. They trade in lives, not openly, but quietly. In the shadows, they send workers to far colonies. But some never arrive. They vanish." Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had heard of such things in the outer sector's legal slave routes, forced labor camps, but hearing it from someone who lived inside the noble house made it real. "And you?" he asked. "I found records," she said. "I don't think they know how much I saw, but I took one copy with me. They know it is missing, and they suspect me." Daniel exhaled slowly. "And instead of running, you slept on me." Her expression softened. "It was the safest move I could make. I needed someone the nobles would hesitate to cross. A stranger, a human, someone unpredictable." Daniel let out a short laugh. "I'm not sure if that's a compliment." "It is," she said. Her voice was steady now. "You may not realize it, but humans have a reputation here, dangerous, stubborn, and impossible to control. Even the most powerful hesitate before provoking one." Daniel shook his head. "I'm just a cargo runner. I don't even carry a weapon most days." Her eyes locked on his. "That is why it will work. They don't know you. They will imagine the worst." The sound of movement drifted through the hallway again. This time, it was softer. As if someone were deliberately trying not to be heard, Daniel whispered, "They're still here." "Yes," Lyra replied. "They won't leave until they're sure you will give me up." Daniel sighed. "And what if I do?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then you will not see me again, and you will know they killed me." The words hung between them like a shadow. Daniel realized this wasn't just her problem anymore. He was already involved, whether he liked it or not. The moment she climbed into his bed, his life had changed. "What's the plan?" he asked finally. Lyra's gaze sharpened. "We need to leave before sunset. Once darkness falls, the law will not protect us." Daniel frowned. "Leave? Go where?" "It's a safe quarter in the lower city. Old friends of my family run a tea house there. They can hide us for a time, and after that?" he asked. "We get the records to the Galactic Authority," she said. "Once they see the proof, they will have to act against the nobles." Daniel leaned back, thinking, "You're asking me to go up against one of the most powerful families in the city?" Her voice was calm, but her hands were trembling now. "I'm asking you to help me save dozens of people, maybe hundreds." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. The fear in her eyes was real. But so was the determination. Finally, he nodded. "All right. I'm in." Lyra exhaled, some of the tension in her shoulders easing. But the relief was short-lived. There was a sudden knock at the door. Not loud, but firm. A voice spoke, low and cold. "We know she's in there. Human. Give her to us. And you can walk away." Daniel stood, moving toward the door. "You hear that?" he called. "Sounds like they think I'm predictable." Lyra's golden eyes flashed. "Then show them they're wrong." The air in the room felt heavier. The choice had been made, and there was no turning back. Daniel didn't open the door. Instead, he stepped back and glanced at Lyra. "We leave now," he said in a low voice. She nodded, already moving toward the small bag she had tucked under the bed. From inside, she pulled out a folded scarf, a plain coat, and a small metal case no bigger than her palm. "That's the proof?" Daniel asked. "Yes," she whispered, slipping it inside her coat. "If they get this, everything is over." The knock came again. Harder this time. "Last chance. Human," the voice growled. Daniel motioned for her to stay quiet. He grabbed his jacket, opened the window, and looked down. The drop wasn't far to meters to the alley floor. The narrow street below was empty, at least for now. He climbed out first, landing with a muffled thud. Then he reached up for Lyra. She hesitated. Glancing toward the door, the handle was starting to turn. "Jump!" Daniel hissed. She leaped, and he caught her, steadying her before pulling her into the shadows. Moments later, the door above burst open. Heavy footsteps pounding into the room. Voices barked orders, but they were already moving away. The alley twisted and narrowed as they slipped through it. Daniel kept a fast pace. Lyra close behind. Her breathing was quick but steady. She didn't complain. "You know the way to this safe quarter?" Daniel asked. "Yes," she said, "but it's across the merchant district, and that's open ground." They reached the end of the alley. The wider street beyond was busy traders calling out prices. Stalls filled with goods, the air thick with the smell of spices and metal. Daniel pulled Lyra's scarf higher over her head, hiding the glint of her golden eyes. "Stay close," he murmured. They blended into the crowd, moving between shoppers and carts. Daniel's eyes scanned the faces around them, looking for anyone moving too deliberately, anyone watching too closely. It didn't take long to spot them, two tall figures in dark coats, standing at opposite ends of the street. Pretending to browse the stalls, their movements were too still, too focused. "They found us," Daniel said under his breath. Lyra didn't look, just kept walking. "If we run here, it will draw attention. Keep moving until the turn ahead." Then we cut through the old smelter yard. They passed one of the figures, Daniel catching the flash of a cum bead in the alien's ear. His hand twitched toward his pocket, wishing he had brought his sidearm. But a fight here would trap them. They reached the turn and slipped into a narrow lane between two metalwork shops. The noise of the market faded, replaced by the echo of their footsteps. "Faster," Lyra urged, glancing over her shoulder. Daniel pushed on. The lane opening into the rusted skeleton of the smelter yard, rows of broken machinery, heaps of scrap metal, and the faint hiss of steam from old pipes. It should have been empty, but it wasn't. 3 more figures waited inside, weapons slung low but ready. Daniel stopped, pulling Lyra back behind a stack of rusted crates. "They were expecting us," he muttered. A voice called out from the shadows, calm and confident. "No need to run, human. You don't even know what you're protecting." Daniel raised his voice. I know enough. Lyra's hand brushed his arm, a silent signal. She pointed to a low-service tunnel on the far side of the yard, barely visible behind a pile of broken piping. It connects to the lower drains, she whispered. It's a way out. But we'll have to get past them. Daniel took a slow breath. All right. On my mark, the 3 enforcers started to spread out, their boots crunching over the gravel. Daniel stepped into view for just a moment, enough to draw their attention. Now he hissed, and both of them darted toward the tunnel. Shouts erupted. The enforcers moved fast, but Daniel grabbed a loose length of pipe from the ground. Swinging it hard at the nearest one, the blow knocked the weapon from the alien's hands. Buying a few seconds, Lyra slipped through the gap first, Daniel following close behind. The tunnel was narrow and smelled of rust and damp. Their footsteps splashed through shallow water as they ran. They'll follow, Daniel said. Yes. Lyra replied, but this path splits. They won't know which way we take. At the first fork, she pointed left, and they plunged into deeper darkness. The air grew colder. The sound of pursuit fading behind them. Finally, after what felt like forever, a faint light appeared ahead. They emerged into a quiet back street, far from the merchant district. Lyra pulled her scarf tighter, scanning the shadows. We still have hours before sunset, but they'll double their search now. Daniel glanced at her. Then we make those hours count. She nodded, and together they moved deeper into the maze of streets, both knowing the pursuit was far from over. Asterisk, the safe quarter was nothing like the busy merchant streets they had left behind. Here, the buildings leaned close together, their upper balconies almost touching, creating a canopy of shadows over the narrow lanes. The air smelled faintly of tea leaves, burning wood, and old stone. Lyra led the way. Keeping her scarf pulled tight, Daniel followed, scanning every doorway and rooftop for movement. It was quieter here, but quiet didn't always mean safe. Finally, they stopped outside a small tea house. Its wooden sign swayed gently in the breeze. Carved with curling alien letters, a faint light glowed from inside, warm against the dim street. Lyra knocked in a soft, rhythmic pattern. After a moment, the door opened just enough for a pair of cautious eyes to peer out. Lyra, a woman's voice whispered in surprise. Coming quickly, they slipped inside. The smell of spiced tea washed over them, and Daniel felt the tension in his shoulders ease just a little. The woman who had let them in was older, her silver hair tied back in a neat braid. She embraced Lyra briefly before glancing at Daniel. And this is my protector, Lyra said simply. The woman's gaze lingered on Daniel for a moment, as if weighing him, then she nodded. Follow me. She led them upstairs to a small room with a low table and a narrow bed. You can rest here, she said. No one will look for you in this quarter, not yet. When she left, Daniel sat down at the table while Lyra removed her scarf, letting her pale hair fall over her shoulders. For the first time since they met, she looked tired, not just physically, but in the way her eyes softened, as if the constant edge of fear had dulled for a moment. You trust her? Daniel asked. Yes, Lyra replied. She was a friend of my mother. Before the nobles took control of everything, her family was part of the old council. Daniel leaned back. Sounds like the nobles have been running things for a long time. They have, Lyra said quietly, but not always like this. It used to be strict but fair. Now, greed rules. He studied her face. And you? Were you born into service? No, she said, shaking her head. My parents owned a small vineyard in the Western Hills. When the noble family expanded their territory, we were given a choice: serve them or lose everything. My parents became estate workers. I became a maid. Daniel frowned. And you stayed, even after you saw what they were doing. Her eyes flickered with something sharp: guilt, maybe anger. At first I told myself I couldn't fight them. I thought, maybe if I kept my head down, they'd leave me alone. But then I started noticing people disappearing, workers I knew, friends. They would be sent away, and no one would speak of them again. Daniel's voice was low, and that's when you found the records. She nodded. Yes, I was cleaning one of the private offices the head steward left in a hurry. And the console was still open. I saw the shipment logs. The destinations didn't match the official reports. Daniel rubbed his temples. You realize you've put yourself in the center of something much bigger than either of us. I know, she said, her voice firm again. That's why. I needed someone who wouldn't just hand me over. They fell silent for a moment. The only sound, the distant murmur of voices downstairs. Finally, Daniel asked, this protector thing. Is it just a way to scare the nobles, or does it mean something more to you? Her golden eyes met his, steady and unblinking. It means I've placed my life in your hands. In my culture, that's not done lightly. Once it's declared, it is not easily undone. Daniel didn't look away. And if I told you, I'm not sure I can keep you safe. She smiled faintly. Then I tell you, I've already made my choice. Before Daniel could respond, a soft knock came at the door. It was the older woman from downstairs. She stepped inside, her expression tense. Two men were asking about. You in the street, she said to Lyra. They described your hair, your eyes. They'll find you eventually. Daniel stood. Then we can't stay long. Lyra reached for her coat. We'll leave after dark. The older woman shook her head. No, the lower streets are not safe at night. Too many places to be cornered. Wait until morning. The patrols will keep them away. Daniel didn't like it, but he nodded. They needed rest, and moving in darkness would give the nobles an advantage that night. Daniel lay awake on the floor while Lyra rested on the bed. The soft rhythm of her breathing filled the quiet room, but his mind wouldn't settle. He kept thinking about the look in her eyes earlier, the trust she had given him without hesitation. And for the first time, Daniel realized something. This wasn't just about protecting her anymore. Somewhere between the narrow alleys and the close calls, he had started wanting to protect her, not because of tradition or law, but because she was Lyra. Outside, in the shadows of the safe quarter, a figure watched the tea house from across the street, waiting for the moment the human and the alien maid would make their next move. The morning came too early. Daniel had barely closed his eyes when the first light slipped through the cracks in the shutters. The tea house was quiet, but the kind of quiet that felt watched. He sat up, rubbing his face, and saw Lyra, already awake, sitting at the small table with the metal case in front of her. You keep staring at that thing, Daniel said, voice still heavy with sleep. Lyra glanced at him, because it's everything. She tapped the case lightly. If this is destroyed, all I have left is my word. And no one will believe a maid over a noble. Daniel sat across from her, then show me what's inside. She hesitated, her fingers tracing the small lock. If I show you, you'll understand why they will never stop hunting me. I think I already do, Daniel replied. But I want to see it anyway. Lyra pressed her thumb against a small plate on the side. The lock clicked open, and she lifted the lid. Inside was a flat data crystal, no bigger than a coin, glowing faintly blue. This, she said softly, is the shipment ledger for the last 3 years. The nobles keep to versions 1 for the public, 1 for themselves. This is theirs. Daniel leaned forward as she slid the crystal into a portable reader. The screen lit up with lines of alien script, dates, and locations. He didn't understand the words, but the patterns were clear. Certain names repeated. Certain destinations ended abruptly. Look here, Lyra said, pointing. These workers were assigned to agricultural colonies, but there's no return logs, no follow-up shipments. They vanish every time. Daniel's jaw tightened, and this is just hidden in the steward's office. She nodded. They don't fear anyone inside the estate. They think servants are too afraid to act. Daniel studied the list again. Do you know where they're sending them? Yes, Lyra said, her voice low, to mining worlds on. The fringe, places with no oversight, no law. Workers there don't live long, sometimes only a year. Daniel leaned back, staring at the glowing screen. The weight of it sank in. This wasn't just about Lyra anymore. This was hundreds of people, maybe more. Why bring this to me? He asked finally. You could have gone straight to the Galactic Authority. I can't, she said. The Authority has noble influence too. If I bring this alone, they'll hand me back before I can speak, but with a human protector. They'll hesitate, they fear the political mess humans can cause. Daniel gave a dry smile. So I'm your troublemaker. Her lips curved faintly. Yes. But I chose well, before Daniel could reply. The older woman from downstairs burst into the room, her face pale. They've found you, she whispered. To squads one at each end of the street, Lyra was already on her feet, scooping. The crystal back into the case. We need to move, she said. Daniel grabbed his jacket back way. The woman nodded. Through the storeroom there's a delivery door that opens to the canal path. They hurried downstairs, the smell of tea replaced by the sharp scent of fear. Ka. In the storeroom, stacks of crates lined the walls, blocking most of the light from the small back door. Daniel eased it open just a crack and looked out. The canal path was empty, except for a slow-moving barge in the distance. Mist rolled off the water, thick enough to hide in. Go, he said. Stepping aside for Lyra, they slipped into the mist, keeping low as they followed the narrow path along. The water, the sound of boots echoed faintly behind them, distant, but getting closer. They're sweeping the quarter, Lyra said. Daniel glanced at the water. We could take the barge. She shook her head. Too slow, they'd catch us before it reached the next turn. The path curved ahead toward an arched stone bridge. Beyond it lay the wider streets of the craftsman's district. But as they reached the bridge, its figures stepped out from the fog, blocking the way. Both carried short, curved weapons. Their movements slow but deliberate. Daniel stepped forward, keeping Lyra behind him. We're just walking, he said evenly. One of the figures tilted his head. Not from here, human. And your friend, she's worth a great deal to the right. People, not for sale, Daniel replied. The man's grin was slow and unpleasant. Everything's for sale. Before he could take another step, Daniel moved. He swung a punch hard into the man's jaw, sending him staggering back toward the canal wall. The second attacker lunged, but Lyra stepped aside, tripping him into the shallow water. They didn't wait for the men to recover. Daniel grabbed her hand, and they ran across the bridge into the craftsman's district. By the time they slowed, both were breathing hard, Lyra still clutching the case to her chest. Daniel glanced at her. We need to get this to the authorities soon, before they close every way out of the city, she nodded, her golden eyes bright. In the morning light, then we don't stop until we do. In the shadows behind them, one of the attackers from the bridge was already speaking into a cum bead. His voice low and eager. They're heading east, send everyone. Asterisk. The eastern quarter of the city was louder, busier, and harder to move through. Merchants shouted prices from stalls, carts rattled over cobblestones, and the smell of hot bread mixed with smoke from the blacksmith's forges. It should have been the perfect place to disappear, but Daniel knew better. Crowds could hide you, but they could also trap you. Lyra kept close, her scarf drawn high, one hand gripping the metal case under her coat. Daniel walked slightly ahead, scanning every face, every shadow. They'll expect us to head for the authority office, he said quietly. Yes, Lyra replied. Which is why we're going somewhere else first. Where? The old transport hangar, she said. From there, we can send the data crystal to a contact I trust, someone outside the city. Daniel didn't argue. If the nobles had influence inside the authority, getting the evidence out by courier might be their only chance, but as they turned down a narrow lane leading toward the industrial district, Daniel spotted movement on the rooftops, two figures keeping pace. Weapons slung over their backs. "They're here," he muttered. Lyra didn't look, just picked up her pace. "Then we have to be faster." They reached the hangar district, a maze of rusted metal buildings and wide loading yards. The air smelled of oil and damp stone. The old transport hangar loomed ahead, its massive doors half open. Inside, the space was empty, except for rows of abandoned cargo crates. Dust motes drifted through the sunlight streaming from high windows. "This way," Lyra whispered, leading him toward a small control room at the far end. But before they reached it, a metallic clang echoed from behind. Daniel turned to see the massive hangar doors sliding shut, sealing them in from the shadows. Half a dozen armed enforcers stepped into view, blocking every path. Well, a deep voice called, "The runaway maid and her human pet." Daniel's jaw tightened. He recognized the speaker, the same voice from the door of the guest room 2 days ago. The lead enforcer was tall, with heavy armor plates across his chest and arms. His weapon was a long, hooked blade. Gleaming in the light, Lyra stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You're breaking your own laws by coming for me while I'm under protection." The man chuckled. "Laws are for the people who can't rewrite them." "Girl," Daniel moved in front of her, his voice cold, "then you'll have to go through me." The man's grin widened. Gladly, he barked an order, and the others spread out, circling. Daniel's mind raced. There were too many to take head-on. But the crates and machinery gave them cover. "Stay low," he murmured to Lyra. "And when you see a chance run," the first enforcer lunged, swinging his blade in a wide arc. Daniel ducked, grabbed a loose metal rod from the floor, and drove it hard into the man's midsection. The alien doubled over, gasping. Another attacker came from the side. But Daniel shoved a crate into his path, sending him sprawling. 2 more closed in together. Forcing Daniel back toward the control room, he fought with quick, brutal strikes, never staying in one place long enough to be surrounded. His movements were raw and desperate, but unpredictable, just as Lyra had said humans were. From the corner of his eye, Daniel saw Lyra dart toward the control room door. Clutching the case, an enforcer moved to intercept her. But Daniel slammed into him from behind, knocking him off balance. "Go!" Daniel shouted. Lyra burst into the control room, slamming the door shut behind her. Inside, she dropped the case onto the console and powered up the ancient transmitter. The system hummed weakly, but the uplink light flickered to life. In the hangar, Daniel was tiring. His rod was bent now, his arms aching. One enforcer's blade grazed his shoulder, tearing his jacket and drawing a thin line of blood. The lead enforcer stepped forward, circling him like a predator. "You fight well, human," he said. "But you can't win." Daniel spat dust from his mouth. "Maybe not. But I can keep you busy." The man lunged, but Daniel sidestepped, using the momentum to send him crashing into a crate. It bought him just enough time to retreat toward the control room. Inside, Lyra was frantically typing. "Almost there." She called, "Just a few more seconds." Daniel slammed the door behind him, wedging it shut with the bent rod. The sound of pounding fists echoed from outside. The console beeped, sharp, clean tone. "It's sent," Lyra said, her voice trembling with relief. "The data is out. They can't stop it now." Daniel allowed himself one short breath before the metal rod bent further under the force of the attackers outside. The door rattled. "They'll still try to kill us," he said. Lyra's eyes met his, steady despite the fear. "Then we make our stand." The door burst open, splintering the frame. The enforcers surged in, but now Daniel fought with the fierce certainty of someone who had already won the most important battle. Every second they stayed alive was another second the nobles' crimes were racing across the stars. The fight in the control room was chaos. Daniel swung at anything that came close, every movement driven by the thought that if he fell, Lyra would be next. The enforcers pressed in from all sides, their weapons glinting in the weak morning light that spilled through the cracked windows. One attacker lunged for Lyra, but Daniel intercepted him, ramming a shoulder into his chest and sending him crashing into the console. Sparks flew, the old transmitter crackling in protest. "They're not stopping," Daniel growled, breath ragged. "They don't have to," Lyra replied, voice strained as she ducked under another swing. "The message is already gone. We just have to survive long enough for help to arrive." That was easier said than done. Daniel's arms burned, his lungs ached, and every blow he blocked rattled through his bones. Still, he kept moving, hitting, dodging, dragging overturned chairs and broken panels into their attackers' paths. Then, over the noise of the fight came a low rumble. It started faint, but grew quickly a deep, heavy sound that made the floor tremble. The enforcers hesitated, glancing toward the hangar doors. A second later, the massive outer gates shuddered and began to slide open. Blinding daylight poured in, and with it came the sleek silver hulls of two Galactic Authority patrol skimmers. Their engines roared, their sirens blared. "Authority!" A voice boomed from loudspeakers. "Stand down immediately." The lead enforcer cursed under his breath. "We're not done," he snarled at Daniel. But there was no conviction in his voice. The law here was fragile, but even the nobles couldn't openly defy the authority when they came in force. The enforcers backed away, some slipping into the shadows, others retreating toward the far exit. Within moments, the control room was clear, except for Daniel and Lyra. Daniel slumped against the wall, breathing hard. "Looks like your message worked." Lyra allowed herself the smallest smile. "Yes. But it's not over yet." The patrol officers entered, their dark uniforms crisp, their eyes sharp. The lead officer, a tall woman with steel-gray skin, looked from Lyra to Daniel. "We've received your transmission. The evidence is secure. The nobles will face trial." Lyra straightened, "And the workers?" "They'll be freed," the officer replied. "Every name on that ledger will be accounted for." Lyra exhaled, her shoulders sagging with relief. For the first time since Daniel had met her, the fear in her eyes was gone. The officer turned to him. "You fought well for someone not in our service." Daniel gave a tired shrug. "Guess I got caught up in someone else's fight." The officer studied him a moment longer, then nodded. "Sometimes, those are the most important fights." She gestured for her team to secure the hangar and left to oversee the arrests, as the noise of the authority crews filled the space. Daniel and Lyra stepped outside into the fresh air. The city felt different, still noisy but lighter, as if some invisible weight had shifted. "You're free now," Daniel said, glancing at her. "No more hiding." "Yes," she replied softly, "and so are the others." They walked in silence for a while, making their way toward the quieter streets on the city's edge. Daniel kept expecting her to say goodbye, to thank him, and go start a new life, but she didn't. Finally, she stopped and turned to face him. "There's something you should know about our custom," she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "The protector thing?" "Yes." Lyra nodded. "It doesn't end when the danger is over. It ends when both agree to part ways, or when one dies." Daniel blinked. "So you're telling me?" "I'm still your protector." Her golden eyes softened. "If you want to be, but it doesn't have to be duty anymore. Can be choice." For a moment, Daniel thought about the past few days, the alley chases, the close calls, the quiet moments when she looked at him not with fear, but with trust. He thought about how quickly she had gone from a stranger in his bed to someone he couldn't imagine walking away from. "I think," he said slowly, "I can live with the custom." A small smile touched her lips. "Then so can I." They started walking again, Not toward the tea house, not toward the authority office, but toward the distant hills beyond the city. The road ahead was uncertain. But for the first time since that morning in the guest room, Daniel wasn't thinking about what might go wrong. Behind them, the city buzzed with news of the noble's fall. And somewhere, freed workers began to take their first steps into the Lord. Sunlight. Lyra glanced at Daniel, her voice almost playful now. You know? There's another part of the custom you haven't learned yet. Daniel smirked. Do I need to worry? Maybe, she said, her smile widening. But I'll explain it. Tomorrow, they walked on, side by side, the noise of the city fading behind them, and the promise of something new waiting just ahead.